All right. Well, welcome everybody to the September edition of the Equal Eats Roundtable. And this is one of my absolute favorite topics. Really glad that we can do this one. My name's Kyle Dine, and our topic today is summer travel success stories. And this is a near and dear topic for me because I've had my food allergies for a few decades now, and I just remember when I started to travel, I just heard about a lot of the opposite stories of why I can't travel, why it's too difficult, why I won't have success. So this is a topic that I love because it is possible. There can be amazing success stories out there, and we have a panel today that has been there around the world, and again, and had amazing experiences, which they're going to share today, tell their stories, and answer your questions. So it's very interactive. At any point, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat or join in on the discussion, and they can elaborate on their stories or answer your questions. So welcome, welcome. I'm going to introduce them in 1 second. We are brought to you today by Equal Eats. This is the company that I run, and we help people travel all around the world with food allergies and dietary restrictions, providing high quality allergy translation cards in 50 different languages. I've got a lot of food allergies myself, so I'm sure I've got a few stories I'm going to interject today as well, but really excited to be joined today by three world travelers that are incredibly inspiring, and that is Janine Flannery, Mo Swinson, and Kelsey Austin. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. So maybe we'll just go around the horn here, and you can just give a quick introduction about yourself, your allergy journey, what led you to accomplished, confident traveler. So Janine, go ahead, start us off.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks so much for having me. My name, as Kyle said, is Janine Flannery. I am the face behind the allergy aspect on social media, and I have a son who's 15 years old now. He started in infancy with food allergies and more recent eosinophilic esophagitis.
No, I think we lost you. So while we're waiting to get Janine back, Kelsey, would you want to tag in?
Of course. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining today, and thanks Kyle for hosting this. My name is Kelsey. I have allergies myself. I was diagnosed when I was really little. I was around 2.5, to a laundry list of allergies: peanuts, tree nuts, dairy, gluten, soy, shellfish, kiwi, banana, raspberries, blackberries, cats. And instead of kind of pushing me away from all things food and beverage and that, it kind of pushed me towards it. I really developed a love for food and hospitality, and I ended up going to school for hospitality management at Cornell. I worked in hotel food and beverage management after that. So I'm really familiar with the kitchen and hotels and that piece, and I've always had a love for travel. So I've really traveled the world. And all of that has helped me just travel safely, but also not let it hold me back from anything. So I've been to a lot of really cool places, and my most recent trip, I brought my Equal Eats cards with me, and those were really, really helpful. But I'm excited to be here chatting with everyone today.
Awesome. Can't wait to hear about how you've done it with such a laundry list, as you put it, of allergies. Cool. Thanks, Kelsey. And Janine, you're back. I think we got just the teaser. So finish it off. You'll just have to unmute here. There you go. Oh, sorry, Janine. You just have to unmute.
Oh my gosh.
There we go.
I'm really batting 1,000 here. Anyway, so my name is Janine Flannery. I'm from the allergy aspect, and on allergy aspect, I share our travels and dining challenges with my 15-year-old son who has food allergies and eosinophilic esophagitis. We had some great travel successes this past summer that I'm here to share, and I'll say I definitely had concerns and a lot of discomfort in the years when he was much younger, and then we hit that period of COVID when it was middle school time and really time to start learning some of those skills. So we're trying to catch up for lost time and doing pretty well, I think. So I look forward to sharing those success stories with you.
Can't wait to hear. And there's always lots of time to travel. So I love that you're so eager. And last but not least, we have Mo Swinson. Hey Mo, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. My name is Mo. I live in New York City, and I run an Instagram account called Nut Free in NYC, where I show all of the places I eat around the city and also around the world. I was diagnosed with food allergies to tree nuts and peanuts, and more recently pink peppercorn, which is pretty rare, I think. I was diagnosed with those allergies when I was about 6 months old, so I've been managing these allergies my entire life. Grew up, and it wasn't until like my mid-20s I'd been hearing people say, you can't do this, you can't eat out at restaurants, you can't go anywhere, you can't, just a lot of can't. And in my mid-20s I realized that's not necessarily true. I can do a lot of things with a little bit of extra preparation and the right tools, like my Equal Eats cards. So I'm just excited to share some of my adventures from this summer and be here today.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Mo. So what a panel. We're dealing with a lot of different allergies from you name it, with one panelist that has quite a list. Pink peppercorn, you're definitely not the first person that I've heard with that allergy, so you're not alone. And then we have some others, and even EOE covered here, so a lot of different perspectives. So please feel free to pipe in if you relate to any, or if you have a different perspective. I know that we have a lot of followers that have latex allergies and ones that aren't covered necessarily on this panel, but we're absolutely mindful of them nonetheless. So before we jump into it, I just have to say, it's so nice to just take a moment to debrief after the summer. So much work goes into planning for summer travel, and especially for allergy travel, more so than your normal travel. It kind of starts in November if you're traveling in the summer, getting everything ready, getting all the plans in order, all the research. So I find this is such a nice time in September to take a step back and just celebrate what just happened, in terms of you put a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort into going somewhere across the world, managing a very severe condition and doing it safely. So really excited just to do a debrief. So I guess let's just start off. I'll stop sharing my screen here, and let's go into the summer highlights. Where did you go, and why was it so amazing? So Janine, start us off maybe of your summer trip. What was so great?
Sure. Yeah, I would say it was a location on our bucket list as a family. We went to Iceland, and as you just said, all the planning that goes into it, in preparation for our call today, I kind of took my Iceland file out of my file cabinet where I keep notes and all kinds of things that I refer back to for other trips, because I've already done the work for one trip. I might as well, use it towards an upcoming trip. And I was just looking at all my notes and restaurant notes and discussions that I had and how I started the process. And I really just start, if we have a destination, which I'll say Iceland for me was probably, the remoteness of some of the locations was a bit of a concern for me. So with that in mind, my husband and I decided that we would stay local to cities and then kind of make 2 home bases and then do day trips from there. So we did clock a lot of miles on the car, but we will stay in Airbnbs or VRBO and have access to a kitchen. And once we have that set up, then I started my restaurant research and what our itinerary would be. And I start with the Spoken app and look up restaurants in the location that we're going to be staying that's relatively close, and ask for some recommendations just from friends that travel pretty often, and found a couple restaurants that seem like good options. I'll contact them via phone. I contact them via social media, and between the two modes of communication, I got comfortable with a couple locations. And I'll say one downtown Reykjavik, which turns out it was like a block from the hospital, It turns out the general manager had food allergies herself. And it was a good learning experience, I would say, for my son, who is 15 and not super engaged in, wanting to eat out. He sees it more as a bother, and he doesn't want to be the center of attention. So he doesn't really take the reins. We're trying to kind of get him more comfortable with that. So we did have the situation the first time we went to this restaurant. We ended up, did I say we ate there 3 times? 3 dinners we ate at the same place, but it didn't matter because it was so good and they were so accommodating. So it was definitely worth it. And he felt safe. It felt like a win-win for everyone. And the food was great for everyone. It wasn't just, not just for my son, but we did have a good experience there with, we had our Equal Eat chef card. Definitely please take it in the back, show it to the chef. It worked out well. It was a good, as I said, learning experience for my son because, I let him first start and then, he wants to have minimal conversations. So he's like, okay, it sounds good. And I was like, well, wait a second. Like, we need to ask some more questions, like just because they took the card and they took, like, you have to, well, what did the chef say? Can the chef come out? So we had a good rapport with them and really had 3 great dinners there. In the midst, I will say, we were there the days before the volcano eruption. So we were having 4.0 plus earthquakes throughout the days leading up to it, which at that restaurant, we were upstairs and like the restaurant was shaking. And I was like, no one seems to be too concerned about this. So we're just going to continue on with our meal. You think getting allergens in your meal are what your concern is, but we also were experiencing earthquakes. So that was a interesting aspect that we hadn't planned on. So kept it interesting when we were visiting there. So I'd say that was our first good dining experience when we were in Reykjavik.
Fantastic. I relate in a way, like 15-year-old boy. I remember being 15 and allergic and just like that, like grunting. I didn't really have much to say for myself at the time, but we also did travel. That wasn't part of our
Yeah.
the summertime. And the fact that you just exposed your son to the world and how it can be done just by modeling, by doing so much like work ahead of time and on the ground. Sometimes it doesn't always seem like it sinks right in and behavior change happens overnight, but it does sink in, that's for sure. And it does last with him. So congrats on setting up that.
Yeah, little by little. Yeah.
Amazing experience for him. Glad that you got away from all the disasters. Extra spice that you weren't planning on.
Yeah, we did actually think like, should we actually be leaving instead of continuing on with our trip? But we were like, well, we got a couple of days. We'll just, we got home and it was 48 hours later, it erupted. So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to have more questions for you in a bit, especially around booking your own accommodations and that. But glad to hear that Iceland was such a win this summer. That's great to hear. Moving on, let's go, while we're going clockwise around the world here, I guess. I know Paris was on the agenda for Kelsey this summer. So Kelsey, tell us about your summer. Where were you? What were you up to? How was it?
Yeah, Paris was awesome. I went on a 6-day trip at the end of August with my mom, my aunt, and my cousin, who also has a nut allergy. So it was just an allergy squad. Hi, Amanda. It was a great trip. We stayed in Paris the entire time, but we took a couple of day trips outside of the city to Giverny. I got to do some twirls with the water lilies. We also did a day trip to Champagne. Per kind of my insistence. I love the Champagne region. I love wine. I love the history of that. So it was a really special day that we did there. And then otherwise we walked around, we went to museums, we did some sightseeing and ate at some very yummy restaurants. Some that I kind of became friends with a couple owners of the restaurants. So I know I took some pictures and posted them and tagged Equal Eats in them because I use my card everywhere. But I made my way into a couple of kitchens just to chat with the chefs chat with the owners to make sure that everything I was eating was safe. And they really went above and beyond at a lot of these places. So it was just really wonderful.
Fantastic. Paris is a foodie's paradise. And, for a lot of people with food allergies, food is not the primary purpose of travel. It's kind of secondary. So what made you have that drive to go to a place where cuisine was such a big part of the experience, and then embrace it and just enjoy champagne? I'm sure there was food tastings. What made you dive into that?
I think I've definitely traveled a lot, so Paris did not feel so scary to me, kind of a trip like this. But I think that when you're going somewhere, food is part of the culture. Food is culture. And if you have the opportunity to try it and to be part of that in a safe way, then I think it's really helpful to do. And I mean, it's something that I'm very aware of what happens in kitchens. I'm well versed in kind of all of that in all areas of the hospitality industry. So it makes me feel much more comfortable doing that. But it's just being comfortable with yourself and being confident to make those judgment calls, and kind of knowing, okay, if I'm looking at something and it looks unsafe for me, I'm not going to eat it. If it smells not okay, I'm not going to eat it. But if it seems safe, and if I'm being told it's safe, and I've done my whole checklist in my head, then I'm going to go for it, because it's part of the culture, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to experience.
I just love your confidence. It's fantastic, and the fact that you just invited yourself and got invited into kitchens in Paris is fantastic. And I hope I see the day where my wife and I get to have you over for dinner, and you just kind of come on into the kitchen. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely, anytime.
Right. And last but not least, Mo, where you went here, there, and everywhere this summer. Fill us in.
Yes. We started off in like late May, early June in Italy. And then the highlights, I'd say, were more recently at the end of August and beginning of this month, when we went to Uruguay and Argentina. I'd say Uruguay and Argentina were the highlight, because I'd been to Italy before, which was great, but never been to South America. I don't really know any Spanish. My husband learned some for the trip, but just ate out at so many good restaurants. Didn't know enough Spanish to fully communicate my allergy. My husband didn't know enough Spanish to communicate my allergies, but the Equal Eats cards took us so far, and people were very understanding. When they would take the card, they would look at it, their eyes would kind of raise, because I have all of the tree nuts and peanuts listed out, and pink peppercorns on my card. So it's a long list of things. People would be like, oh, you could tell they were like, uh-oh, like, I don't know if we can accommodate her. But they would slowly read through, and they're like, you could see they're considering it, like, oh, okay, it's like all the same general food category. And so oftentimes they would point at the menu and say nada, and we were like, what? And they would be like, they kind of gestured, and I was like, oh, they mean they don't have any nuts here, or none of my allergens, which was amazing. So I ate a lot of empanadas, a lot of really good food. But I'd say the highlight was we signed up for like this cooking class. We didn't really realize what we were signing up for at the time, but I found this cooking class in Buenos Aires at this woman's house, and I was originally like, I'm not sure if this is the best idea, but I sent her my Equal Eats card, like a picture of it. I was like, I have food allergies. I just sent them over, and she responded within like 2 minutes, like, you'll be fine. We don't use any of that here. And I was like, oh, okay, great. So my husband and I took this amazing cooking course in this like high-rise apartment overlooking Buenos Aires, like cooking like empanadas and like cookies, a stew. We had mate, which is like a type of tea, which was really lovely. And we just chatted for hours with this woman about food and culture, traveling after COVID and everything, or with the pandemic. And it was just really a lot of fun and lovely. So that turned out really well for me, especially because the other couple who was supposed to join us canceled. So we just got a private cooking class just with this one person. So yeah.
Lucky you. With these travels, did you do much planning in terms of these activities and where you'd go, or were you just jumping into it?
tried to research restaurants ahead of time in Argentina, but I found that a lot of the restaurants, they didn't necessarily always have the menu, or the ones that did have a menu had already been booked up. So I did as much planning as I could, but we honestly just got pretty lucky just walking into places who just didn't happen to have a lot of nuts, I guess, or if they did, they were kept very separate. Something that I learned from the host of the cooking class was that a lot of the food there, like in all the restaurants, it's not like pre-prepared. Like in America, you'll have something like a sauce or something that's pre-made and they heat it up there, or there are components of the meal that are processed. And I'm sure we're all familiar with this. They're processed in a facility that may contain. That was not the case there. Everything was made fresh. So there's a lot more clarity about like what was going into the food and where it came from. So once we realized that, it just made eating out a whole lot easier. And I felt like I had more freedom to go places that weren't on my list of like pre-approved places. Because there were because I used Spoken, the link that you shared earlier, Kyle, I used that to plan trips, but there weren't a lot of places in Buenos Aires or even any in Uruguay. So really just like, just hoping for the best in both spots, but we got really lucky. So, well, with the use of the cards, obviously, but yeah.
Love it. And other than the cards, though, I'm just so envious because you kind of jumped off South America into the unknown. What are some of the other tips that you have of just what became a successful trip for you without, knowing exactly what your itinerary was?
Yeah, I mean, we had some tours planned and things like that, and we relied on one tour guide for recommendations about places to go where she thought I'd be able to eat. So that was helpful for future planning. But looking at Google Maps, I always mark out hospitals. I always try and find places that are easily accessed by transportation. I don't know, I just did a lot of research about what Argentina was like and the areas we were going to kind of get a general sense of what was available, while not having too high of expectations that I would get to enjoy it all and I would have to be more flexible. So yeah.
I love it. It's a really, really great perspective. And then just on the other end, it sounds like with the trip to Iceland this summer, Janine, you put in a lot of planning, a lot of time and work and effort. Did you find that everything that you put in helped in making it overall a success? Was there anything that you wish you would have done now in retrospect, or did you cover your bases?
Yeah, I feel like all the research definitely paid off. I think one thing I did probably when I started the restaurant research was, just understanding basically by looking at the menus in restaurants in Reykjavik and Iceland, like what do they eat? What's a common meal that they have there? And my husband's 110% Irish, so he would prefer to eat meat and potatoes. So you can easily get that in Iceland. So, and that happens to be something that is safe for my son. He avoids the top 9 plus some others. So basically just real food, nothing fancy. We don't need sauces. He's thrilled with just the very basics. It doesn't have to be very fancy or elaborate. And like you said, we don't spend a lot of time around the food occasion, but this one time when we had that one restaurant that really went above and beyond, and I'll say this is the first time he tried an aioli, which I would never even bother to make or even look up myself, because when he was younger, using sauces wasn't something that he really wanted. And I would say the same thing for my other son who doesn't have any food allergies. So once we talked to the chef and understood the ingredients in particular, he was thrilled with that. He was, dunking everything that even doesn't go in aioli, and then eating it just to try it. So I was gonna say, when I got home, I have to try it myself and just see if we can find some ways to incorporate it in meals, because it was such a simple addition and seemed very elaborate and special for him. So I'd say in terms of the planning, I definitely think it paid off. Having the Equal Eats card, I mean, I end up taking my picture of it on the table all the time, just because I feel like it's like also recognition for my son, just to see that we're using it, as much as he might hand it to the chef or to the server, just kind of shows it's a special occasion. And, we don't eat out a lot, even though even here locally this summer we did have a lot of success with him. I just went to apply this weekend for his permit. He's going to be driving. So really, really trying hard to find ways for him to eat out with friends. And we've been to Chipotle in our local town. Just the other weekend was our 6th time. We had one issue, one slight reaction, but each time we're learning. We show the Equal Eats card each time. They've gotten to know us so much so that, they're not taking it now. It's just that he's learning by seeing the process, so we can hopefully get him a little more independent. So I'd say that was a huge win for us as well. Did take a lot of planning. We did walk in there many times over the years, the one in our local town, and really depended on who was working with how comfortable we felt. And at his age, I feel like when he was younger, it was much more difficult to trust a young child to explain how they were feeling versus, he's a teenager now. And when he says something doesn't feel right, he has the words to explain it, So, so I'd say definitely planning, both in Iceland and here locally with the use of the chef card, definitely was, a good eating out and experiencing beyond our kitchen for my son.
Well, I love that you did so much research work, even just on the cuisine. I think that just it starts to narrow you in on what are the risks in a given cuisine and culture. And I'm a little bit curious, what is the standard Icelandic dish? Is it seafood?
Well, there's a lot of fish, yeah, and there's a lot of lamb.
Okay.
He chose like a tenderloin with potatoes, and the vegetables were super fresh. I understand, being in that area they import a lot, so I would say it wasn't a cheap trip in terms of restaurant eating, but everything was super fresh. So and however that chef was preparing the food was pretty impressive, so we were pleased.
Fantastic. And I love that you went to the same restaurant 3 times. I've
Yeah.
definitely been there, done that. And once you have that rapport with the chef and you feel comfortable there, like why mess up a good thing and just keep,
Exactly.
which is a great segue back to Kelsey. Speaking of rapport with chefs, how did you get in the kitchen? How did you get in
That
Paris?
is the question.
Isn't this like it's an institution, like no one can even see what goes on in those walls? It's super secret. What's your secret?
I speak chef. I mean, that is one of the beauties of working in food and beverage and kind of understanding it from that perspective. In this particular situation, there was a family who owned a couple of restaurants in Paris. We dined at one of their restaurants one of the earlier nights, and on the next night we ended up at another one of their, like, the same group of same family of restaurants. We went in there and we told the husband of this couple, "Oh, hi, we met Carol last night. She said you're awesome." And I started telling him about my allergies. He goes, "Oh, I already know you." Brought out an amuse-bouche that I already could have. That was this like eggplant in an olive oil with basil and mint. It was amazing. And then I kind of just started asking a lot of questions about the menu, and what I could have, what I couldn't have, what I thought I might be able to have, just kind of from looking at the menu and asking him a lot of kind of educated questions. And he finally just said, "You know what, come with me." It took about 4 steps to get to the kitchen because it was a tiny restaurant. And I made friends with Chef Eric. It was awesome. He basically built something from the menu just based on what he had in the kitchen, knowing what I could have and knowing what I was asking about, asking my preferences. I said hi to the whole kitchen team. They were awesome. And I ended up with, I mean, we had a lot of food. It was really good. We had a swordfish dish. We had zucchini 3 ways. We had a risotto that was made with that eggplant amuse-bouche I started the night with. And then the wine list was amazing. So it was just overall a top-notch meal. And it's just, they really went above and beyond. And I think just being able to speak the language, not necessarily French, but speak the kitchen language and speak the food language, and to have them understand that I know what I'm talking about, but also that I respect and appreciate the culture of the food and what they're doing, is just a really nice thing. And having worked in food and beverage and in the industry, and knowing what goes on behind in the back of house, a simple thank you and someone being really excited about something that you're passionate about goes a really long way.
Incredible. So maybe you can help translate your food and beverage language to a lay person who microwaves hot dogs. What would you suggest for people that don't have that type of experience to actually bridge that type of communication barrier? We obviously have languages to deal with, but how do you have a rapport with food service staff when you're traveling? What are some of the just easy tips and tricks for people to keep in mind?
Definitely. So I usually, when I'm going about ordering, I love to clearly do the research beforehand, look at a menu, make sure that it looks reasonable. My most serious allergies are nuts, so I always just check and see if nuts are even on the menu to see if that's a concern. And then when I sit down, I can actually look at the menu, whoever I'm speaking to. I make sure that they're educated enough just when I start asking questions. And I always start by saying, I have allergies. That's the first thing, because that raises that red flag in their head. And they say, if they can handle it, they will stick around. If they can't, they will find someone who can. So once I'm actually speaking to the correct person who knows my list of allergies, and it was really helpful on this trip because I had my card with me. This was the first time traveling to a non-English speaking country that I had the Equal Eats card. So it was really nice. And then I will do my menu scan and see what, one, I'd be interested in eating, but two, what I think I'd be able to eat, either with some tweaks or as is. Sometimes that happens. And then I can ask those questions. This looks like I might be able to have it. Can I? What changes would need to be made? And then they write those down, and I say, what does chef recommend? Of these items, what's easiest for you? What does chef recommend? So that way it's making sure that I'm still my health and safety is the priority, but also that I'm actually going to enjoy the food that I'm eating. It's not just because it's safe, I'm okay eating it. I would still like to make sure that the quality is up and that I'm going to enjoy it. And then I say, let chef handle the rest. I trust and respect whatever they're going to put in front of me, as long as it's safe and it's yummy. And for the most part, especially when traveling internationally, that's what's helped me a lot, because it gives them the final choice of, this is what makes the most sense for you. And I know you're going to enjoy it, and I know it's safe.
Fantastic. I love that food is not a secondary experience for you when you travel. Like, it really means a lot to you.
It's definitely a lot of effort, and you have to be okay taking up the space sometimes, but in my experience, it's worth it. And it's definitely something, my parents are on this call right now, and it's definitely something that they instilled in me in a very young age when traveling internationally. It was something that they prioritized, that I was able to communicate it myself, and that I was okay taking up kind of the airspace in that. And I mean, when I was 4 years old, I was chatting with chefs in the kitchen, and we have photos of it. So it's something that I'm really grateful that I have now, and it's a skill set that has taken time and a lot of, I guess, guts to develop. But I'm really grateful that I have it, not just in the allergy world, but in like business, in life, and all of those things. So Janine, what you're doing, I totally respect it, and you're killing it too.
Yeah, it really all pays off, and it's not overnight, but these were some of the things I did not have growing up. I was not in the kitchen hanging out with chefs, and it's a hard battle for me to speak up, and it's very foreign territory going to a kitchen. So admirable everything you do, and kudos to your parents that are here. Well, you're such a trailblazer for the allergy community. So, great stories from the summer, really great to hear, but I know that there's more travel wins beyond just what happened this last summer. Can you think of any stories, any experiences within the last few years, perhaps, where it just made you feel great, that this is all doable, that the time that you put in, the worry that you had, it was all worthwhile just for certain experiences you had traveling with your food allergies or your child's?
This is for all of us.
Yeah, for anybody. And while you're thinking, I will just remind everybody watching, you're more than welcome to ask questions, throw them in the chat, raise your hand, unmute. We will probably continue for another 15 minutes or so. So if you have any questions, just pop them in. We'll try to get to them. Otherwise, yeah, are there some travel wins that you can think of over the last few years where you just thought like, this is all worthwhile? What a great experience.
Well, I'll share something from this past spring. Our family went to Paris, and that was a, I would say probably it had been a year since we had been internationally. So, taking a year off of international travel and kind of gearing up for another international trip. And with my son's allergies, we didn't have a whole lot of luck in Paris. We did search out one restaurant that was not recommended, wasn't on any, allergy friendly list, but had a great experience there. And one thing I'll say that, and I don't know if Kelsey and Mo, you found this as well, or Kyle, if the kitchen has like an open kitchen where you can see from the dining area, you have direct, you have eyesight with the chef. In this particular restaurant, we went early. We were one of the first two tables there, and the chefs were right accessible. And the server, had me walk over, and I could speak one-on-one with the chef. It wasn't, it didn't feel like an exclusive area that wasn't welcome to, customers. So that really helped and gave me the confidence, because I could even see throughout the preparation of my son's meal, glancing over and looking at the chef card or asking for a confirmation. And I went over once. So that really helped to, give me confidence that they understood what my requests were, and that my son could also see that happening, and why this relationship with a chef at a restaurant is important. And I'll say too that we really wanted to go to Paris in and of itself, but then my two boys are big World War II history buffs, so we did take a ride out to Normandy, which was a bucket list item for them. We were out there so with such little time that we found the cutest little Airbnb, VRBO, and it was just so quaint. It was just such a realistic cultural experience. That I almost feel like we didn't even need the food. We just brought our own, and then we headed back to Paris and visited that restaurant, not for a full meal, but for something to go.
Wow, what an experience.
Yeah.
Mo or Kelsey, is there one that you're thinking of from the past? A great experience you've had?
I mean, definitely. My junior year of college, I was lucky enough to go abroad on a trip called Semester at Sea. So I lived on a ship for a semester for 4 months and traveled the world, literally. So it started in California and it kept going west through Asia, around South Africa, and north, and it ended in Europe. So I went to a lot of countries, a lot of places where food could have been, or definitely was, a concern. And it was really empowering, first of all, to be able to do something like that, and to be able to make a decision and just go, but to trust my instincts kind of along the way. But I mean, we went to Japan, China, Vietnam, Myanmar, India, Mauritius, South Africa, Ghana, Morocco, and then I ended in London, and then went to Spain afterward. I speak English and Spanish. I do not speak any of those languages. So this was pre-Equal Eats card, and I was making friends before going on this trip, and making my own handwritten cards and having them write the translated version by hand so I could photocopy them and I could hand them to people. I was asking questions left and right, but I would say that the experience was definitely life-changing. I know everyone says that when they come back from a semester abroad, but for me, it was literally, I went around the world and got to experience the cuisine in those places. which is definitely something, looking back years from that, it's not something I thought I would have been able to do, especially given just the language barriers, kitchens, anything like that. So that was just a really awesome thing to have been able to do. And at the same time, to be able to trust myself to just go for it and do it. And that's I guess my advice to anybody who's afraid to travel or anything like that, to really trust your instincts. Any allergy person literally has been training for this since you were diagnosed, like, you know yourself. And being able to make decisions based on what your gut says and be okay saying no at the same time is the same thing. Because in the end of the day, if I couldn't eat a dish when I was in India, that was okay because I was still in India and it was awesome. So just being able to trust yourself and be able to be okay saying no when the time comes, is a really helpful, I guess, piece of advice that I would give.
Fantastic advice. You know, I second that we've been all raised to have this spider sense, this gut feeling of what is right and what is wrong, and when to say no, when in doubt. And you know, with all of the talk tonight about with planning, and sometimes you can only plan so much. You just hit the ground and you go. We still have our gut. We still have our instincts to keep safe. The things that work at home still work abroad, in wherever you go around the world. So amazing advice to always stick to your guns, but to never get caught up in that. It's you can plan all year long. You can keep planning and planning and planning. At some point you have to take that lunge and go, and you'll be okay on the ground. Mo, what was the trip? What was that one that you still reminisce about? You're looking at the photo album still.
Well, I think my honeymoon to Italy, I've been to Italy before, but not to all the places we went this time earlier in May. And my trip to Argentina and Uruguay was very much the opposite. Like, didn't have a spreadsheet, very much had like a spreadsheet with multiple tabs for Italy, cross-reference blogs and spoken and people's Instagram accounts. And one place that was not on the list, where we were staying in this small, like, little place where we were, we just happened upon there. My husband and I were like, this looks fine, doesn't look like there are a lot of nuts on the menu, this is great. Another family was seated across from us, and so we ordered first, and they heard me say I have food allergies, and I handed her my card, and after the waiter took my card away, the dad turned around and was like, we have food allergies too, what food allergies do you have? And his son had the same allergies as I did. So we just talked about our experiences, because we were going like the opposite way. We were both like at the midpoints of our trip, and our routes were the exact like opposite. So we like traded restaurants and just like advice and just stories. So that was just really nice to meet a fellow allergy traveler in like a smaller place. Just really bonded really quickly. It was very strange because we realized that we were beside them on the train to that little city, and then we ended up sitting right next to them on the train out. So it was just like fate like put us just together. And that was just a really nice experience.
Cool. Power in numbers. That's great. We had a question. Thanks so much, Susie. So, oh wow, you're working on a trip to London. Such a wonderful place to go to. They have great lists of allergens, but I'm also running into a lot of off-putting allergy disclaimers that we can't guarantee your allergy isn't in your meal. We usually pass on those, but it's really limiting our options. Any advice? Has anybody been to London or the UK and dealt with this type?
So I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to preface this by that. I went to Ireland and Scotland last year, and I believe that they had passed something called Natasha's Law somewhat recently there, and they're required to list, I think, the top 14 allergens. So they have their menus are labeled incredibly well. Like restaurants, bakeries. Sorry, you probably know more about that than I do.
Jump in just to make sure that the law gets the coverage.
Please do.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of EU and UK have a law for restaurants where it was passed in 2015, and all of the restaurants have to label the top 14 allergens on the menu, or they can disclose it verbally. You have that option. So if they don't have it in writing, they are required to know it, to tell you verbally. Natasha's Law was about 2-3 years ago, and it's for any type of baked goods or fresh goods that are made on premise. Those now have to be labeled. So if they made a sandwich or a bun those have to now be labeled for the top 14 allergens.
Got it. So I
I
am
just want to
fully
make sure that it's
misinformed.
clear to everybody.
Thank you. No, thank you for that. I totally was misinformed, but it's great because everything's labeled really well. So in my experience, that we can't guarantee this is kind of just to, it means that somewhere in the kitchen, but for the most part, they're very, very aware. So it's kind of a cover your butt kind of statement. Just in my kind of understanding of it.
I've been to, I think I've been to London like 4 or 5 times. I don't know why I've been so many times, but it's been a lot. And I was going to say, I found they're very allergy aware. I remember going, I think the first time I went was in like 2010, and they weren't as, I felt like they were less allergy aware, and I've noticed it's gotten better. And including one time where they actually had a surcharge for allergen like related things on the menu. Like they would charge you an extra amount of money to like change their gloves and things. And I had mixed feelings about that, but the fact that they had this protocol put in place made me feel better. But whenever I do see that on a menu, I do immediately have this reaction like, oh, that doesn't make me feel great about going there. But I have found, because I see that warning also in the US a lot of times, I find that like talking to someone and being like, hey, this is my situation. I saw this on the menu. This is my allergen. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you can do? And just asking whatever your food allergy questions are, like whether it's about cross contact or just like, who's going to communicate it, whatever kind of system you have in place for yourself. I still like to check in just to see how they react and if they're taking it seriously, because I have eaten places where they have that warning because, for example, like maybe nuts aren't on the menu as much, or they do have a separate like area for them, or whatever that specific place has going on in the kitchen. But I would still just contact someone and not just immediately like turn away, because you never know what's going on, and you may end up finding someone who has food allergies working in the kitchen or the restaurant, which has happened to me before as well. They're like, oh yeah, I have food allergies, but I eat here all the time and my allergens are in the kitchen. This is what we can do. But again, it's all up to your personal preference of like safety and like comfort. But again, I wouldn't immediately cross those restaurants off your list.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the UK is an interesting place where it's been so much legislation in a very short amount of time, where it almost seems like it's a catch-up time. But from my experience, labeling is really well done. You're going to see some disclaimers like that, but on the ground, usually you're getting restaurants that really want to accommodate you, that you're not the first person that day coming in with a food allergy, that they have protocols in place, but there might just be some type of rule that they're following just to put this on. So contact them in advance. I put a link in there, allergycompanions.com, or maybe it's .uk. Fantastic website just for UK based restaurants to get a little bit more info on them. So we've been going at this for 45 minutes. Fantastic. If there are any more questions, it's last call. Put them in now if you have any more questions. Would love to hear. And perhaps we kind of go around the group now with any last advice for people that perhaps have never traveled internationally before. It seems like a few steps ahead of them right now. They don't know what to expect. They think that it might be negative. What advice would you give to somebody in that position that's just starting out down this road of trying to get an international trip in their future?
Well, I'll say, Kyle, that when you mentioned one of the listeners was asking about London, that was our first international location with my son. And in thinking back to the dining experiences we had in London, while I do remember lots of communication in terms of what allergens were served in certain dishes, I felt like, because it was our first international trip with my son, we didn't eat out much. I think we did one occasion where we ate out, and I prepared food, brought some food. I feel like that was like a good first step for us to know that we could actually, we were worried about customs and we did get stopped, and I had, 2 doctor's letters. I really feel like every trip international we've been on, having doctor's letters in terms of food that I might have and medication has really helped a lot. So that's one recommendation that I have. Definitely doctor's letters. even your first trip, like find a place where you have a kitchen and plan to make the majority of your meals. Maybe find one place just to start. It doesn't have to mean that you're eating every single meal out, which seems kind of daunting if you haven't done it before. Especially, and that's one thing too. We made our first international trip to a location where we spoke the language. So there wasn't a language barrier. You don't have to do that, but that made us feel a little bit more comfortable. Yeah, so it's not, you don't have to do it all. Just to take some baby steps to get more comfortable for that next trip and that next trip.
Nice. Taking a giant lunge and make it a baby step.
Mhm.
Great. Mo or Kelsey?
I was gonna say, you may not, my general mindset about traveling is I may not be able to do everything, but I can do a lot of things. Kind of like what Janine said, starting small, maybe somewhere that speaks the same language as you, where you can cater your own meals, and just finding like gently like pushing the limits of your comfort level. Like, okay, like maybe I want to go out to eat today, or maybe I want to get some takeout or something, like finding a way to push those boundaries in a way that makes you feel safe, keeping yourself safe with your allergies or your loved ones' allergies, and just going from there and then going to another country where they speak another language, for example. And recognizing like you may be able to go somewhere, maybe you don't eat out at that meal, but you can have a glass of wine or a soda or something, like still getting to enjoy yourself as much as you can and just being flexible.
Love it. Kelsey?
Yeah, a bunch of things. I definitely echo what Janine and Mo said about everything. My first international trip was also London. English speaking, they were really helpful with everything. I know that I sometimes sound casual when I talk about traveling to all of these places. And I don't, I think that's just because I've become very comfortable with it over time. It's definitely taken time and a lot of effort and a lot of research. So I think that research was definitely the common theme for all three of us, that we make sure that we research everywhere, that we make sure we know our stuff before we go. And that, and it depends on if you're an adult, if you have kids, whoever the allergy person is, making sure that they're comfortable speaking up or asking for what they need and things like that when you're at home. So making sure that you feel okay to do those things before you go out is really something that I recommend, because then when you're there, it's the extra added layer of, okay, I'm traveling, okay, I'm not in my safe space. So it adds a layer to it. So I would say make sure that you feel comfortable where you are at home before you go, but at the same time, you're never going to ever feel 100% comfortable. So kind of finding the balance and kind of going from there. But I definitely research, knowing your stuff, and be okay saying no. If there's a time where you're like, do I do it? Do I not? You're better safe than sorry most of the time. So there's that. But I think that all of us can say from experience that travel is worth it. Travel is awesome. It definitely broadens everything. So I would say it's about finding balance.
I agree wholeheartedly with all of your comments, and I will just add that I think there's consequences to not traveling. I think it's easy not to travel. It's easy to have staycations. That is easy. That was my teenage years for the most part. But it is a muscle, and the more that you actually exercise it, the more that you do it, the more that you get into experiences that are unfamiliar, but you have the plan in place to deal with them, the better you get, the more comfortable you get. So I give my hats off, kudos to Janine for introducing all of these amazing places to your son during those years where he's just seeing it firsthand that it's doable. Even though he's probably not finding his pure, advocate voice yet, he will. He'll know that the world's his oyster. And super cool that Kelsey's parents are here, that they've helped her find her voice way long ago, and look at her see the world and just thrive through all of these incredible adventures and stay safe. And Mo, I'm not sure of your background or upbringing, but you just go to these incredible places that I only dream of, and I can see the tacks on your pinboard. And I'm just jealous of your pinboard, your background.
This pinboard's actually just for me and my travels husband. I'm very honored and privileged to say I've actually been to almost 30 countries. I will hit 30 next year, so I'm very excited. And I'm thankful for the Equal Eats cards, which is going to make that possible for me to go to places I would otherwise be very nervous to go without.
Hey, that is what we're all about. Where we started this business just to help people gain more confidence, bridge language barriers, and see the world where you don't have to have so much to worry about. We already have enough. So I do want to thank our panel for all of their incredible insight, their positivity, and just their general advice, their can-do attitude that you can travel, you can be safe, you don't have to let allergies limit your adventure. Just go, but plan. And thank you to our audience, for everybody who attended today. Thank you for your questions and your interest. To the family members and friends and coworkers that are all here, thank you so much. We appreciate your support. We're going to be back doing these roundtables every single month, so stay tuned for the next one. We're going to be talking with Chef Joel Schaefer in October about dining out with food allergies, what chefs want to hear. So that will be a really interesting one, and many more coming up. So again, thank you, Mo, thank you, Janine, and thank you, Kelsey, and wishing you many safe, amazing travels ahead. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.